they're always upgrading. Yeah. Okay, so let me share the screen again. So when a person makes what's called a hoda'ah, an acknowledgement that the item is sold. Remember, we said you can't say, I will give it to you in front of witnesses. That's meaningless, but you have to say, I've sold it to you, or it's sold. And he says, V'kasav b'shut noda b'Yehuda, shahodahu hakinyan ba'atzmo, that just making a public acknowledgement is a form of making a kinyan. That's what we call a kinyan odisa. V'lo mitam shekivin shahod amrinan shekvar hiknalo. And we don't say, it's not because once you make a public acknowledgement, we assume that the kinyan has already been made. Ela shezehu hakinyan ba'atzmo. But that is in itself the kinyan. Making a public acknowledgement is in itself a form of kinyan. Kasher l'daiti hodahu hakinyan hagadol shebechol hakinyanim va'afilu davar she'eno nikna b'shum kinyan niknahu b'hodah. Noda b'Yehuda says that any item that you have difficulty transferring ownership in any other way, you can transfer ownership by making an odisa, what's called a public acknowledgement. Okay, so that's what we were talking about, is making a public acknowledgement to the witnesses that item now belongs to Ploni is a form of kinyan. Choshen herech b'kinyan odisa. So the Ktsos also spends a lot of time on this mechanism. He holds that it is in itself a kinyan. Some say that a public acknowledgement is not the actual mechanics of a kinyan, but rather it's just a statement of trustworthiness. That we believe a person when he says the item is no longer mine and it belongs to Ploni. And that's why the Choshen says that you should not rely on that mechanism alone when you sell the chametz to a goy. So I just want to let you know, just now that we're talking about it, is that there are six different methods of kinyan that we use. I've spoken about this before. 6 different methods of kinyan that we use when we sell the chametz to a goy. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's 6. But I can actually show you. What do I have to rely on my memory? Hold on one second. Here, I'll show you from. I have notes that I made for myself. Let's see. Mechiras chametz instructions. Here we go. Here, let me just see. Here, I'll just share the screen so that everyone can see it. Here we go. So one is that we give the non-Jew cash to rent the space so that the Gentile gives me the cash to rent the space where the object is resting, where the chametz is resting. And once he becomes the owner of your cabinet space, right, because I'm selling the chametz on your behalf. So basically, the non-Jew gives me cash, he rents the space where the chametz is resting, and then there's a principle of kinyan agav, or kinyan karka, that whatever's resting on a person's real estate can acquire can acquire whatever's on that real estate. And there are actually two different mechanisms for that kind of kinyan. One is that when he rents the real estate, simultaneously he acquires the goods resting on it. And the other one is that it's sequential. First, he acquires the real estate, and then he acquires mentally, he designates that he wants his real estate to acquire everything that's resting on it. So he says, I want to acquire all the chametz that's resting on that real estate. He also uses a kinyan kesef, where he gives me additional cash to just straight out make a down payment on the chametz. So one's called kinyan kesef, and then the two real estate ones were called kinyan chatzir and kinyan agav. Okay, then we do a chalipin, where he gives me a handkerchief or anything else of value. Let's say he gives me his car keys or whatever, or a pen, and then I give him the chametz in exchange. Okay, then we do a kinyan odisa. This is number 4, I think. Yeah, where I make a public declaration that the chametz is his. And when this is done in the presence of the 3 that are present, that makes it a public acknowledgement. Then we have Mesiras Hashtar, where I give him all of the authorization forms, and together with the contract that I sign with him. Okay, I give that to him. He takes possession of those shtaros. He becomes the owner of it. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I plugged into the network now just to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But we've had some internet problems this morning. In any event, so the point of my showing you all of the 6 different methods of kinyan is to show you that specifically because we have this machlokus between the No Debi Yehuda and the K'tzos HaChoshen, 18th century poskim that are found in the Shulchan Aruch, it's for this reason that we do so many different methods of kinyan. We do a kinyan odisa because according to the No Debi Yehuda, kinyan odisa is actually a legitimate form of kinyan. but we do 5 other methods because according to the Choshen, it's not actually a method of kinyan at all. It's just a public acknowledgement. You believe the person making that statement. These are all legit kinyanim that are mentioned by the Gemara, right? No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. This is how every rabbi does it. Yeah. I use all 6. I use all 6 different methods, so that way your bases are covered. I'm sure in secular law this exists also, that you sometimes cover your bases by utilizing multiple methods of transaction to make sure that no one can contest it afterwards. Yeah, handshake is one of the methods. Well, you explain, I mean, so basically you say, so we have a deal. You're going to buy the chametz, right? Or you're purchasing the chametz. One of the mechanisms of transaction is a handshake, because that's something that has become conventional among many different industries. But there might be a poskim who challenge whether a situmta, that handshake, is valid. So we do other methods as well. Right. Okay. So anyway, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, when you're doing this and he's giving you a down payment on the chametz, wouldn't that down payment have to be like commiserate with the value of that? Like, I would imagine, I kind of pictured you'd say, give me $1. Because
so I actually have him give me $20. And the reason is I actually have him give me $40 total at the outset of the purchase. So what I do is I give him $100 cash the day before. I usually, whether it's Anthony or whether it's oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank? Justin. I used Justin for a couple of years. I use Anthony now for a couple of years. And what I'll do is that I give them, I'll drop off to their store or to them personally. Here, I just want to give you a gift. I give them $100 in cash. I say, you're going to need some cash to enact this transaction tomorrow. And we do this, but we do the transaction twice, by the way. We sit down twice, once the night before Pesach and once the morning of Erev Pesach. We do the night before because of people traveling to Eretz Yisrael who need the mechira according to the time zone where they find themselves. Even though their chametz is in Toronto, you go according to most poskim, you go according to where the seller of the chametz is located. So I have to sell it, the night before to make sure that I cover it, for his time zone. Yeah, I actually haven't had that issue. If it was Australia, there would be problems. I would probably have to tell the person, we do have Doug is in New Zealand. I'd probably have to tell him, go sell the chametz with the rabbi locally there. Don't sell it with me. I haven't used Jesse yet. Maybe I'll use him. No. I could. I used Ted when Ted was here. Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing wrong at all. So they put down one down payment of $20 to rent the real estate where all of the chametz is occupied. And then they give me another $20 as a down payment on the actual purchase price of the chametz, which we say will be assessed at some later date. Now, why do I use $20? Why not use $1 like Wayne asked? Because according to many poskim, in order for him to make a legitimate down payment, he has to put down at least one pruta for every person's chametz, for every different person who's being represented in this transaction for their chametz. Sometimes we have 1,000 people who are being, or more, 2,000 people who are being represented in the sale. And so in order for that to work, there has to be enough for 1,000 prutas, how much is a pruta? Maybe 1 or 2 cents.
But
So
why is a pruta enough? Like, it just seems like it should be enough to be today's prices.
no, it's a down payment, Wayne. It's a down payment. A down payment can be a minimal amount. It's basically, you're basically saying, I'm hereby beginning the payment process. I will complete, and that's a mechanism of Kinyan. I will complete the payment process after Pesach, right? And that's why, in other words, if the Gentile were not to show up, he would be on the hook for everyone's chametz. He would have to pay for everyone's chametz. He's generated a debt, okay? And we don't know how much the debt is. We basically write in the contract, we will hire a professional valuator, assessor, to determine the value of how much chametz you've actually purchased, and we will give you a 2% discount as an incentive, right? Just to make sure that we're going to be fair with you. We'll only charge you 98% of fair market value of all the chametz that's, So, for people who have expensive Scotch collections, you got to realize I'm selling your Scotch at a 2% discount. Okay. Well, what I do is I say to him, listen, in lieu of doing the actual valuation, would you be willing to let me purchase back your ownership of the chametz? And I give him usually $150. Would this be a fair price? So he ends up making a couple $100 in the whole transaction. There are tshuvas about that. Yeah. That's right. We have to let people know that they can't use their chametz until this is resolved. But then, he becomes on the hook. He's going to have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, we'll show them the paperwork. Yeah. In theory, I guess. But there are tshuvas that say that there's a way to rely on different heterim. If the guy ends up skipping town or if he dies. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Od nachlaku aposkim ba'odisa iboi dafke edim. Is also a machlokus whether when you make a kinyan odisa, this public declaration that I mentioned, whether you need edim. The das haktzos Choshen de bo'inon edim, bim hodelo beino leveino, or afilu bifnei edim rak lomar atem edai lo mahani klum. And so the tzos says you need to have witnesses, and if you don't have witnesses, a declaration is meaningless, and they have to be designated as witnesses. The afal gavta b'chol hakinyanim lo bo'inon edim letzem hakinyan rak limnoa hasheker. He says, because even though with other mechanisms of kinyan, you don't need witnesses. If I just go into a private room with another guy and we do a kinyan chalipin, that's a valid kinyan, whether there are witnesses or not. But with a kinyan odisa, the whole idea of it is that it's a public declaration. Delo ivri sahadi el l'shikra. By other kinyanim, the whole need for witnesses is to make sure no one's going to lie. But with an odisa, it's an intrinsic part of the mechanism. The Nesivas disagrees and says that if it's a full, genuine acknowledgement that the item is now yours, then witnesses are not an integral part of the mechanism.
For the purpose of this, if you're representing the whole community, that you need witnesses or no? Because when you make a transaction, you're transactional individually, but in this case, you're representing.
Yeah, so I'd actually do more than just witnesses. I actually do a based-in. So it's like it even upgrades it even more. I have 3 people present. Yeah. Okay. So, and then we said that if you make a declaration that if this item is hereby acquired to you, may achshav, from this moment, So then that in itself is sufficient as a mechanism of kinyan that when you make the kinyan, you say, from this moment forward, this item becomes yours. And therefore, even if you say the word, I will give it to you, but then you use the word achshav, me achshav, from this moment, so then that clarifies that I will give is not a future tense word, but rather I am giving. V'lo havi kinyan dvarim. The kevin shomer me achshav ein ze lashon havtacha, because since you said the word me achshav, from this moment, you are clarifying that you're not just guaranteeing that you will do something in the future, ela b'hai shtara o b'hai kinyan makna legufa davar, but rather you're using this shtar or this mechanism or other mechanism of kinyan to actually affect the transaction. But if you just say that I will give it to you, so then the kinyan does not work. The kinyan is not an effective kinyan. So be'emes debazen echliku aposkim. He says the truth is this is not so clear cut that the kinyan is not effective. It's a machlokes. V'yesh omrim shimkanu miyado mahani gam lashon etein. Some say that if there's actually a kinyan that accompanies the words "I will give," so then that does affect the kinyan. Elishem Mahari Weil pasak delo mahani, but the Mahari Weil, who was one of the very early Ashkenazi poskim, said that it doesn't help. He says the Sefer Nachal Shiva, which is an important sefer on psak halacha, having to do with marriage and all of the kinyanim that take place before the marriage, clarifies that once you say etain in front of witnesses, you can't go back, even though it may not be a valid method of kinyan. So, and then he said, Im omer b'lashon chiyuv shemis chayiv esatzmo litain. He says, you have to, if you use a language of, I hereby obligate myself to make sure that this gets to you, so that's also a valid method. Once you place the onus upon yourself, I hereby obligate myself to give this to you, so then that obligation starts from the moment that you say it. Similarly, if a person makes a kinyan to commit himself, let's say, to manufacture something, I'll build your house, and we make a kinyan. Or if a person says to his partner, we are going to, I commit that we'll split our partnership, or any other contractual agreement that requires a kinyan, once you use the language, I hereby obligate myself to follow through with this, that language is legally binding. Okay. And then the Rav Shulchan Aruch got into this whole idea at the end of the Sif about writing these first Tanoim and final Tanoim. If you remember, he says, so he says, "V'lachei nagu lichtov Tanoim achronim b'shas hanesuin v'lo dai barishonim." He says that's why there's a minhag to write a second set of Tanoim right before the chuppah, after, even though we did a first set of Tanoim at the engagement. He says because the minhag in the Rav Shulchan Aruch's time was that people did not obligate, they didn't use a language of I hereby obligate myself to provide. Like the fathers would not use that language deliberately in case the engagement would be broken. Remember, that's what we saw. So he says, Noagu lichtov tanaim achronim, v'chayev hu lichtov hu lekabel al atzmo mikoach haknas shekibel al atzmo b'tnoim rishon. So you have to rewrite the document and basically accept upon yourself to renew the obligation to give the couple whatever you've obligated, and you accept upon yourself that I hereby accept the penalty if I don't follow through. Because if a person doesn't wish to do this right before the chuppah, he's demonstrating that he doesn't want to provide the dowry, and then he'll have to pay a penalty. Apparently, the first set of Tanaim made at the engagement said that if I don't follow through, there will be a financial penalty assessed upon me. And then at the second Tanaim, a person actually writes in the Tanaim that I hereby accept to provide, I accept upon myself to provide what I had said in the first Tanaim, and if I don't, I accept and if I don't pay up by a certain date, I will pay an additional penalty. Bishasan is su, and at the time they get married, by that time, at the time of the chuppah, there's no longer any doubt. Is anyone going to break it off? You hope. Because of that, there is a custom to do new tanaim right before the wedding. He says, and that the language that they used in the first tanaim, which can be contested in a beis din because each party said, I will give, without saying I obligate upon myself, or without saying from this moment forward, he says, Mischayvim achshav b'shibud gomer, they changed that language in the second tanaim to make it legally binding, uvekinin me achshav demol, and they use the language of me achshav from this moment forward. Sure, yeah. It could be the same, it could be different. Belashon chiyuv al nafsham, they use the language of obligating upon themselves. The ilu hayu mischayvim belashon chiyuv al nafsham hayamol gam belashon etain. The gami melomar me achshav. He says they actually use both languages. They use the language of I obligate upon myself, and they also use the language of me achshav to cover all their bases. V'chein kasav b'shut chasam sofer dim kasav ploni his chaybes atzmo lazon hazog al shulchano kach v'kach shonim insun ve'elach. He says, let's say one of the fathers said, I hereby obligate myself to provide for the couple for the first 10 years of their marriage. Let's say, for example, that was a typical kind of Tanoim agreement, right? Well, back then a couple would get married at 13, over 13. So you'd obligate for the first 10 years, until they figure out what the meaning of who they are is. Yeah, right. The Havi Kinyan Gomer, he says that's a total Kinyan. Begami Meis Chalala Yorshim, to the point where if the father dies, they can assess the estate. The estate has to pay out whatever was guaranteed. Okay, I guess we'll hold it here for today. We'll probably just start with the next sif when we commence in Mirz Hashem. Probably, I would imagine it'll be 2 weeks from today. But I will either the Monday or Tuesday of 2 weeks from now. I will be in touch with you via WhatsApp to clarify that. It all depends on what kind of sleep I get Sunday night, and then we'll move forward from there. Okay. Thank you. I would love to actually, but I'll probably be in the middle of a tour. So that's
9 hours difference.
Is it 8? It's not the same as Israel. I think it's an hour difference. I thought it was 8 hours, but I can tell you right now. Inshallah.
The UAE, 8 hours.